I remember that day as if the world had stopped spinning. A moment of beauty turned to horror in an instant. I was standing at the altar, my heart pounding with hope and anticipation as I looked into Ayan's eyes, believing that our love could conquer any darkness. The gentle hum of the wedding guests, the soft melody playing in the background, all painted a picture of promise and new beginnings. But then, without warning, the heavy doors burst open and in walked a figure from my past. Shanice, the woman who had once ignited a fire in me so fierce it threatened to consume everything I had built. I still remember the shock that froze my blood. There she was, her eyes burning with a mix of rage, pain, and something even more dangerous, a deep-seated obsession. Her presence shattered the calm of the day, and in that moment, everything fell apart. "You don't get to erase me, Elijah," she screamed, her voice trembling with fury as she advanced down the aisle, a cold, gleaming gun clutched tightly in her hand. The room fell silent, every heartbeat echoing like a drum in the sudden stillness. I stood there, paralyzed by disbelief and heartache, my mind racing back to a time when I believed in her, when her wild allure had promised me a taste of freedom and passion. Back then, I was a young man from a tough Brooklyn neighborhood, a quiet soul with big dreams, determined to rise above the chaos of the streets. I spent countless nights buried in books, my mind filled with visions of a future far removed from the struggles I knew too well. Hope, fragile and easily crushed, was all I had, until Shanice swept into my life like a tempest. I met her at a party where the music thumped and the air reeked of cheap beer and reckless abandon. She approached me with a daring smile and eyes that dared me to break free from my inhibitions. "You look like you could use a little chaos," she whispered, her tone both inviting and dangerous. I hesitated, caught between caution and the irresistible pull of her passion. In that moment, I let go of my reservations, and for a time, I was lost in the whirlwind of her love, a love that burned bright but left deep, dangerous scars. For a while, it was intoxicating. Our nights were wild bursts of passion and reckless abandon, a heady escape from the rigid plans I'd made for my future. Yet beneath her captivating exterior lay secrets I never wanted to know. I soon discovered that Shanice was entangled in a life of peril, a double life filled with shadows and betrayals. One night, as I hunched over textbooks in our cramped apartment, determined to build a future far from the grit of Brooklyn's unforgiving streets, our world shattered. The door exploded inward, and officers flooded the room. I watched in disbelief as Shanice, clutching our newborn son Jaden, mumbled, "I never meant for you to see this." In that instant, the woman I had adored revealed herself to be a harbinger of chaos, pulling me into a vortex of betrayal that left my dreams in ruins. The aftermath was a blur of shattered promises and unanswered letters. Each letter from Shanice reawakened the raw sting of betrayal. Letters filled with desperate pleas and bitter accusations. One read, "You ruined everything, Elijah," words that cut deeper than any physical wound. I was left to pick up the pieces of a life that had once held so much promise, my heart heavy with loss and my future uncertain. In the midst of this storm, I found an unexpected beacon of hope in Ayan. She was a brilliant tech entrepreneur with a quiet strength and a warmth that slowly began to thaw the icy grip of despair around me. During one of our first conversations, as we sat in a cozy corner of a bustling coffee shop, she said, "Sometimes, the worst moments in our lives are the ones that lead us to our true destiny." Her words resonated deep within me, offering a glimpse of the future I had so desperately craved, a future where I could rebuild, not just for myself, but for Jaden, who deserved a life free of the shadows that had marred mine. In the weeks that followed, I immersed myself in work and healing. I juggled endless study sessions and late nights at the hospital, determined to forge a new path in the healthcare industry. Every sleepless night, every agonizing moment of doubt was driven by a fierce commitment to create a better life for Jaden and me. Ayan embraced Jaden with a kindness that felt almost like a second mother. And slowly, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could escape the ghost of my past. Yet the past has a stubborn way of clawing its way back in. Despite my efforts to move forward, Shanice's shadow loomed large. After years of silence and the cold walls of prison, she reappeared, a hardened woman fueled by a relentless obsession to reclaim what she believed was hers. I had heard whispers of her desperate search for Jaden, of her refusal to let go of a love that had long since turned toxic. I tried to bury those memories, to focus on the promise of a new beginning with Ian, but nothing could prepare me for what happened next. On the day of our wedding, a day I had envisioned as the culmination of hope and rebirth, everything unraveled in a heartbeat. As I recited my vows, the familiar warmth in Ian's eyes, a shock rippled through the crowd. The heavy doors slammed open once again, and there she stood, Shanice, eyes wild and haunted, voice trembling with both fury and heartbreak. "If I can't have you, Elijah, then no one will," she cried, her words echoing through the hall as she raised a gun. In that surreal, horrifying moment, time seemed to freeze. I felt the full force of betrayal, sorrow, and a terror so profound that it threatened to break me completely. I reached out, pleading, "Shanice, please, this isn't the way. We can talk, we can fix this." But the chaos that followed drowned out my words. The sound of gunshots, the screams of terrified guests, and the overwhelming rush of despair left me crumpled on the altar, clutching a lifeless Ion in my arms. That day, the promise of love and a fresh start was obliterated, replaced by a nightmare that would haunt me for the rest of my days. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still feel the cold, metallic echo of her final words and the shock of that fateful moment. The wedding day, once a symbol of new beginnings, had become the darkest chapter of my life, a cruel reminder that the past never truly lets go. I spent weeks in a haze after that day, each moment a cruel reminder of how everything had unraveled. I woke up in a stark hospital room with the steady beep of monitors punctuating the silence, the taste of iron and regret heavy on my tongue. The chaos of that wedding day replayed in my mind like a broken record. Ian's warm smile turned to horror, the echo of gunshots, and the shattered dream of a future I had so desperately clung to. One morning, as sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds, I heard a soft knock on the door. Detective Rogers, his kind eyes belying the pain he'd witnessed, sat by my bed. "How are you holding up, Elijah?" he asked in a gentle tone that made the sterile room feel a little less lonely. I struggled with the words, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I'll ever be whole again." He nodded, understanding the depth of the wound. "Sometimes, the scars that aren't visible hurt the most. But you have to fight, for yourself and for Jaden." His words, simple yet sincere, sparked a flicker of determination inside me. After I was discharged, the world outside was a relentless storm of questions and stares. The media painted my pain in harsh headlines, and every conversation felt like an interrogation. I found solace in Marissa, a therapist whose calm demeanor and unwavering empathy guided me through my darkest hours. During one session, she said, "Grief isn't something you get over. It's something you learn to carry. Let it shape you, but don't let it break you." Those words slowly began to mend the ragged edges of my soul. Amidst the relentless barrage of public scrutiny, I reconnected with old friends from Brooklyn. Marco, a lifelong companion with a laugh that could cut through any gloom, surprised me with a call one rainy afternoon. "Elijah, man, I heard about everything. Come over. Let's talk like we used to," he said, his voice warm and inviting. I remember sitting on the stoop of our old brownstone, rain blending with my tears as Marco handed me a steaming cup of coffee. "You know," he said quietly, "sometimes the darkest nights lead to the brightest mornings." His words resonated deep within me, a promise that even in loss there could be a spark of hope. The days turned into weeks, and I found myself surrounded by a community of strangers and friends who shared their own scars and stories. Eva, a determined local journalist, took a special interest in my journey. During one interview at a small diner, she asked, "Elijah, what keeps you going when the weight of your past feels unbearable?" I paused, the memories of Ian's laughter and the terror of that fateful moment mingling in my heart. "It's Jaden," I admitted, my voice cracking with emotion. "Every time I see his smile, I remember that I have to be strong, for him, even when everything inside me wants to break." Her gentle nod and understanding eyes reminded me that sometimes sharing our pain can begin the healing process. But even as I clung to the hope that came from new beginnings, the ghost of Shanice continued to haunt me. Sporadic letters arrived, each envelope reopening wounds I had fought so hard to close. One letter read, "You thought you could leave me behind, Elijah, but you can never escape what we shared." Reading her words stirred a toxic mix of anger and sorrow, a bitter echo of a love that had burned too fiercely and ended in devastation. Nights were the worst. I lay in my small apartment, the city's distant hum mingling with my racing thoughts. I could still see the look in Ayan's eyes as she collapsed, the blood staining her once pristine gown, a memory that cut deeper than any physical pain. In those sleepless hours, I vowed to rebuild, piece by painful piece, even if the shadows of the past lurked in every corner of my mind. I sought refuge in unexpected places. Volunteering at a local shelter allowed me to connect with people who, like me, had been scarred by life's unpredictable cruelty. It was there that I met Keisha, a fierce, determined woman whose own tragedies had transformed her into a beacon of hope for others. One evening, as we sat amidst the murmurs of others seeking solace, she said, "Elijah, our scars aren't marks of defeat, they're badges of survival. Each one tells a story of how we fought back when everything was against us." Her words, raw and honest, began to stitch together the broken fragments of my resolve. Each day brought its own challenges, a constant battle between the urge to succumb to despair and the determination to forge ahead. I attended support groups where strangers became comrades, and every shared tear was a step toward healing. There, I learned that grief wasn't a journey with a clear endpoint, but a winding road where progress was measured in small victories. A kind word from a friend, a moment of unexpected laughter, a silent promise made to Jaden as I watched him sleep. As I navigated this tumultuous path, I found strength in the simplest moments. A warm conversation with Marco on a chilly evening, a supportive hug from Keisha after a particularly hard day, Renat, and the resilience in Jaden's bright eyes reminded me that even the deepest pain could eventually give way to hope. I began to see that while the ghosts of my past would always linger, they no longer had to dictate my future. Even now, as I write these words in the quiet solitude of my apartment, I can feel the slow, steady pulse of life returning, a rhythm that promises renewal despite the scars. I know there are still many battles ahead, and the memory of that day will forever be etched into my soul. But I also know that I'm not defined solely by my pain. I'm defined by the small moments of kindness, the quiet resilience that keeps me moving forward, and the promise I made to Jaden to build a future filled with hope. I'm glad you're still with me, but unfortunately, I can't generate more than 4,096 tokens in a single response at once. Let me know if you'd like me to generate the next part in smaller sections, or if you have specific requests to continue this story. Tron 11J, I spent days unraveling clues, each one a jagged shard of my past that threatened to cut deeper than any wound I had ever known. The trail led me to a small, nondescript office tucked away on a busy Brooklyn street. Inside, a former associate of Chanice's, a man named Raphael, sat behind a cluttered desk, his eyes darting nervously as if he carried the weight of 1,000 secrets. "Elijah, I don't know how much you really want to know," Raphael began, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Chanice, she wasn't just the wild storm that blew into your life. There's a darkness behind her, a secret organization that she was entangled with, something that goes far beyond a toxic love affair." I felt my stomach twist into knots. "What are you talking about? What kind of organization?" Raphael leaned in, lowering his voice even further. "It's not just about passion or revenge. Chanice was working with some dangerous people. People who deal in secrets, in blackmail, in controlling the lives of those who dare cross them. When she got involved with you, she got in too deep. And now that she's back, they're coming for you, for Jaden, for everything you've tried to build." The revelation hit me like a tidal wave. Every sleepless night, every moment of terror at the wedding, had it all been part of something much bigger, a sinister plot that I had never seen coming? I left Raphael's office with a head full of questions and a heart heavier than before. The fear that I had managed to keep at bay now surged with an intensity I couldn't ignore. Over the next few days, I found myself drawn back into that dark world. Keisha and Marco stood by me, their unwavering support a beacon of hope in the midst of chaos. One rainy evening, while huddled in a cramped apartment with Keisha, I listened as she laid out what she knew. "Chanice wasn't acting alone," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging outside. "There's a network, people who have been watching you, manipulating events from the shadows. They see you as a liability now, someone who knows too much, and if they believe you'll expose them, they won't hesitate to eliminate you." I closed my eyes, the image of Ian's final moments flashing before me, mingling with the thought of Jaden's innocent smile. The stakes had become terrifyingly clear. I wasn't just fighting for my own survival. I was fighting for the future of my son, for the promise of a life that could rise from the ashes of despair. One night, I received another letter, a plain, unmarked envelope that felt as cold as the fear that gripped me when I first opened it. This letter was different. It was almost apologetic, written in a trembling hand. It read, "Elijah, I never meant for it to come to this. The forces I was entangled with, they control everything. I did what I thought I had to do. Please, if you ever find it in your heart to forgive, know that I am sorry, but I can't escape them." The letter was unsigned, yet I knew in my gut that it had to be Shanice. Her remorse, her regret, it was all there in every word. I began to question everything. Was there any redemption for someone like her? Could I ever forgive the woman who had torn my world apart, even if she had been a victim of circumstances beyond her control? The questions kept me awake at night, each one gnawing at the remnants of hope I still clung to. In the midst of this inner turmoil, I took solace in the moments I shared with Jaden. Watching him play in the park, his laughter echoing under the wide, open sky, I felt a bittersweet comfort. Those moments reminded me that even in the darkest nights, there were sparks of light, reminders of what I was fighting for. And yet, every time I looked into his eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that our enemies were closing in. I decided to confide in Detective Rogers once more, seeking guidance on the mysterious network that now haunted my every step. Over a cup of lukewarm coffee in his dimly lit office, I recounted the new information. His expression grew grim as he listened, and he finally said, "Elijah, sometimes the past has a way of coming back to remind us that nothing is ever truly buried. I'm going to do everything I can to protect you and Jaden, but you need to be cautious. These people, they're dangerous, and they're not going to stop until they've gotten what they want." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle into my bones. The fight ahead was unlike any I had faced before. It wasn't just about confronting the ghost of Shanice or healing the shattered pieces of my own soul. It was about battling a hidden enemy that lurked in the shadows, determined to erase every trace of the life I had fought so hard to build. As the days bled into nights, I began to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. I spent long hours poring over old photographs, letters, and memories, trying to piece together every detail that might reveal the true nature of the threat. I attended secret meetings with allies who, like me, had been touched by the dark hands of this underground network. Every conversation, every whispered word in darkened rooms, added another layer to the mystery. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights flickering like distant stars, I felt a surge of resolve. I knew that I couldn't let fear dictate my future. I had to stand up, not just for myself, but for Jaden and for all those who had suffered in silence. I wrote down a promise in my journal, a vow to face the past head-on, to uncover the truth no matter how painful it might be. "I will find you," I scribbled, the ink smudging under the weight of my determination. "I will bring every secret to light, and I will fight until every shadow is banished from our lives." The journey ahead was shrouded in uncertainty and danger. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of hope. A belief that even in the midst of darkness, the light of truth and love could prevail. I woke up the next morning to the steady patter of rain against my window and a text from Detective Rogers. "Meet me at a discreet spot in downtown Brooklyn." Stepping out into the drizzly chill, I could feel the city's gray streets mirroring the turmoil inside me. My heart pounded with a mix of dread and determination as I made my way to a dimly lit diner, where a small group awaited me, each person bearing scars of their own battles against the darkness. At a corner booth, I met Victor, a gaunt man whose haunted eyes spoke volumes of past mistakes. Next to him sat Lisa, a sharp-tongued former operative with a fierce glint in her eyes. Victor leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "Elijah, we know exactly what you're up against. This network, these shadowy figures, they run deep, but we've got a plan to expose them. I swallowed hard, feeling both the weight of his words and the promise of a way out. Lisa interjected, "You've got to be ready for anything. They thrive on weakness, and if they sense even a hint of vulnerability, they'll tear into you without mercy." I clenched my fists, the memory of Ian's gentle smile and the terror of that fateful day mingling in my mind. "I won't let them take Jaden away," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've already lost too much." Victor's eyes softened for a moment before hardening again. "There's one lead," he murmured. "A warehouse on the edge of the city. It's rumored to hold their records, proof that could bring their whole operation crashing down. If we can get in and secure that evidence, we might finally end their reign of terror." I felt a surge of resolve, tempered by the dread of what lay ahead. "When do we move?" I asked, knowing that every second brought us closer to an inevitable showdown. That night, cloaked in darkness and the echo of distant sirens, I found myself at the outskirts of the city. The warehouse stood before me like a relic of forgotten sins, its broken windows and rusted doors hinting at the secrets hidden within. Each step toward it was heavy with the promise of discovery and the threat of imminent danger. I took a deep, steadying breath, recalling the warmth of Ian's smile and the fierce hope that had once defined my life. With trembling resolve, I pushed open the creaking door and stepped into the unknown, every nerve on edge as I prepared to confront the darkness that had haunted me for so long. The stale air inside was thick with dust and secrets, and I knew that behind these walls lay the key to dismantling the network that had upended my world. In that silent, ominous moment, I promised myself that I would do whatever it took to protect Jaden and reclaim the future that had been stolen from me. The silence in that hidden office was thick with anticipation and dread as I stared at the safe, my hands trembling with both fear and determination. I could feel every heartbeat echoing in the quiet as I dialed in the numbers, each click of the lock a defiant challenge to the forces that had stolen so much from me. The young man beside me watched intently, his eyes wide with a mix of hope and terror, and I could see the scars of his own battles reflected in them. Finally, with one last hesitant press, the safe clicked open, its door swinging wide to reveal a jumble of documents, digital drives, and photographs. I carefully sifted through the contents, my fingers brushing against pieces of evidence that detailed a sprawling network of corruption and control. Ledgers with names and transactions, coded messages that hinted at blackmail and coercion, and even pictures that showed powerful figures meeting in secret. Each piece of paper felt like a small shard of truth, cutting through the darkness that had enveloped my life. "This is it," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper, as I pulled out a photograph that made my blood run cold. It was Chanice, standing in front of a building that I recognized as a front for one of the organization's operations. Her face, once so full of raw passion and defiance, was now marked with a quiet resignation, an acknowledgement of the control these shadowy figures had over her fate. I could almost hear her silent plea for redemption and the bitter regret that had driven her to such extremes. The young man's voice broke through my thoughts. "You have to take everything, Elijah. This evidence, it's the key to exposing them all," he urged, his tone shaking with both urgency and fear. I nodded, carefully packing the documents and digital drives into a worn leather satchel, each piece a testament to the web of secrets that had ensnared so many lives. Every minute spent here increased the risk that someone might come looking for us, and I knew I had to move fast. I took a deep breath and glanced at the young man. "What's your name?" I asked, needing to know who else was caught in this tangled web. He hesitated for a moment before replying. "I'm Caleb." There was a sadness in his voice that spoke of loss and betrayal, a mirror of my own. "Caleb, thank you for your help. I promise I'll do everything I can to end this nightmare," I said, extending my gratitude as much as a promise. His eyes met mine, and in that brief exchange, we both understood that we were now bound together by a shared quest for justice. Stepping away from the safe, I retraced my steps through the dusty corridor, my mind already racing with plans for how to bring this evidence to light. The weight of what I now held in my hands was immense, not just the physical weight of the documents, but the burden of the truth they contained. Each page, each digital file, was a battle cry against a system that thrived on fear and silence. As I emerged back into the night, the cool air of Brooklyn wrapped around me like a bittersweet embrace. The city, with its flickering streetlights and distant sirens, felt both familiar and alien now. A constant reminder that even in the midst of chaos, hope could be found. I knew that the road ahead would be treacherous, filled with risks that could cost me everything, including Jaden. But in that moment, with the evidence secured and the promise of justice pulsing in my veins, I resolved that I would face whatever came next with unyielding determination. I set off through the deserted streets, the weight of the evidence like a burning secret in my satchel. My mind was a storm of fear and determination. Every dark alley felt like a gauntlet thrown by the enemy, and I knew that each step could be my last. As I hurried along the cracked pavement, the sound of tires screeching on wet asphalt made me freeze. I looked up, heart pounding, to see a black sedan slowly tailing me. Panic gripped me, and I darted into a narrow side street, my breath ragged in the cold air. I clutched the satchel tighter, each thud of my heart echoing in my ears. In that moment, every memory of betrayal and loss surged within me, fueling the desperate need to protect Jaden at all costs. A low, authoritative voice broke through the tension. "Elijah, this way," it called. I recognized it as Detective Rogers. Emerging from the shadows was Rogers himself, his eyes sharp and filled with a mix of concern and resolve. Without a word, he guided me toward a waiting car parked behind an unassuming building. Inside, the car was dimly lit, and I could see that Victor and Lisa had joined us, quiet warriors in this relentless battle. Detective Rogers spoke in a hushed tone. "We knew someone was following you. These people, they don't play by the rules. I've arranged a secure location to review the evidence. We need to act fast before they close in." I nodded silently, the cold dread in my stomach giving way to a steeled determination. "I can't let them hurt Jaden," I said, my voice rough with raw emotion. Victor's gaze met mine, and for a fleeting moment I saw the shared pain of our past battles. As the car sped through rain-slicked streets, I stared out the window, my mind a torrent of memories, of Ian's gentle smile, of the day that shattered my world, and of the unyielding promise I had made to fight for Jaden's future. Every raindrop on the window felt like a silent vow, a testament to the resilience that now pulsed through my veins. We arrived at a nondescript building in a quiet part of Brooklyn. Inside, in a room fortified with locks and hidden from prying eyes, I laid out the evidence on a battered table. The documents, photographs, and digital files spread before me told a story of corruption, power, and the insidious reach of a network that had haunted my every step. Lisa leaned forward, her voice low and determined. "This is our chance, Elijah. If we can connect these dots, we can bring down the entire operation. But we need to move quickly. Their reach is vast, and they're already closing in." I ran my fingers over the scattered papers, each one a painful reminder of a past I had tried so desperately to escape. "I'm ready," I whispered, a promise not just to myself, but to Jaden, to every life that had been shattered by these monsters. "I'll do whatever it takes to end this nightmare." In that dim, secret room, with allies gathered around me, the spark of hope began to grow amidst the darkness. I knew the road ahead was fraught with danger and betrayal. But for the first time in a long while, I felt the stirrings of a future that might still be salvaged from the wreckage of my past. I stood on the edge of a new beginning, the scars of my past still aching but slowly transforming into a source of strength. The evidence we uncovered toppled the dark network that had haunted me, and one by one, their secrets came to light. I watched the news as the corruption unraveled, every headline a blow to those who thrived on our misery. In the midst of it all, I caught a glimpse of Jaden's bright smile, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could take root. Meanwhile, Shanice, once the fierce flame of passion and revenge, was left to face the ruin of her own making. Her world, built on bitterness and betrayal, crumbled beneath the weight of her choices. It was a painful reckoning for her, a fate that proved that the demons we choose to embrace can ultimately devour us from within. As I took a deep breath, I realized that our journey wasn't about erasing the past, but about learning from it. The pain taught me that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the courage to rise after being shattered. In that bittersweet victory, I found a truth worth sharing. Even when life seems to collapse around you, every shattered piece can be rebuilt into something resilient and real. Now, I want to hear from you. What does forgiveness mean to you? Have you ever found strength in your scars, or learned that redemption comes from facing the pain head-on? Share your thoughts and stories. Let's keep this conversation alive, because sometimes the hardest endings lead us to the most meaningful beginnings.